you cannot bet against Google. They have more data than anyone probably, and they have more AI history and capabilities than most other companies, if not all of them. Welcome to the Marketing AI Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making artificial intelligence approachable and actionable. You'll hear from top authors, entrepreneurs, researchers, and executives as they share case studies, strategies, and technologies that have the power to transform your business and your career. My name is Paul Roetzer. I'm the founder of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Welcome to episode 82 of the Marketing AI Show. I'm your host, Paul Roetzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. We are coming to you, it is Monday, February 8th at about 10 a.m. in case anything crazy happens today that we don't get to in this episode. So you are potentially listening to this coming out on Tuesday, February 6th. So we are back. I am home. Mike is home. We were both coming to you from Cleveland this week, which is great. I was out in Arizona last week, which was really cool. Spent a bunch of time with attorneys actually, which was a fascinating thing. I'm not going to get into it today, but lots of conversations around copyright and IP and implications to organizations and different opportunities and challenges that enterprises are going to face from a legal perspective with generative AI. So probably topic for a future episode, Mike, but it was fascinating to, hear their perspective and the things they're thinking about. So my brain on the flight back was just like swirling with things I wanted to go research and topics to talk about. So okay, so today's episode is brought to us by the Marketing AI Institute's AI for Writers Summit. You've heard us talking about this the last couple episodes. This is coming up in almost 1 month from today. It's March 6th, 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. There's an on-demand version, but that's going to be the live. It is a virtual summit, so you can join us from anywhere in the world. Last year, we had over 4,000 writers, editors, and content marketers join us for the inaugural event. This year, I haven't looked at registration lately, but I know it was up over probably 1,500 or more already. So it's a 4-hour event. We've got the sessions are going to be opening talk from me on the state of AI and writing. Mike is going to do generative AI writing tools and platforms you should know. We're going to have a conversation with Megan Keeney Anderson from Jasper, the presenting sponsor of the event. We're going to have an interview I'm going to do with an IP attorney, speaking about the legal side, understanding the legal landscape specifically related to generative AI, all the things you need to know and understand about copyright and trademark, and maybe getting some patent stuff. And then we're going to have a panel on AI writing in the enterprise, what it looks like to adopt these tools and platforms within your marketing team and organization. And then we're going to end with a really cool feature that's going to be AI in action, rapid fire tech demos for writers and creators that Mike and Kathy and I are going to kind of coordinate. And that's going to be probably 5 to 7 different tools showing you a bunch of different use cases. So I'm really excited about that. So that is coming up. You can go to AIWritersSummit.com, or you can just be at Marketing Institute's site and go under events. You'll find all the information. It is free to register. There's a paid option, a private paid option if you don't want to share your contact information with the sponsor. And there's an on-demand option as well. So that is coming up again, March 6th, 1 month from roughly today. And then also, we talked a little bit last week about our new online education offerings. So Piloting AI 2024 goes live on Thursday, February 8th. So that is, Mike and I spent a good chunk of January, about 100 hours or more. I may have spent 100 hours on my own. I don't know about you, Mike, but we did a full update to the Piloting AI 2023 course, the course series. And so it was all redone and recorded in January 2024. So it's all fresh content. We added an entirely new Generative AI 101 course, which I'm pretty excited to get to people. It ended up being like an hour and 20-minute course, Mike. I know you haven't seen it yet, but it was actually kind of fun to build that course. So last year we had more than 800 people go through that series. Again, it'll be live, 18 on-demand courses with quizzes. There's a final exam with professional certification. Once you complete the series, all kinds of templates and downloads and worksheets. Mike previews, about 65 vendors, I think, Mike, go through yours. So Mike teaches 10 courses in the middle that are all these intro to AI for advertising and analytics and communications and SEO and just all these different ways. And so it goes through dozens of use cases and vendors that can really help jumpstart your adoption of AI in your organization. So you can go to pilotingai.com and learn more about that. Also available on Marketing Institute under the education component. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and let's get going on our main topics.
All right, Paul. So first up, we've got kind of a big question that's on a lot of business leaders' minds. Are tools like Microsoft Copilot, Google Duet AI, ChatGPT Team / Enterprise, etc., are these actually worth the money that we're spending per user per month on them? Now, Paul, this is a question that you recently posted on LinkedIn as you broke down the benefit being provided by these paid AI tools and all these different subscriptions that companies are racking up. So you wrote, consider this: an employee making $75,000 a year costs approximately $36 an hour to employ, assuming 2,080 hours per week, or about 173 hours per month based on a 40-hour work week. Now let's assume a very conservative 10% increase in efficiency for an employee who has access to a GPT-4 level solution and has been properly trained on how to use it. And you said you actually think that the average closer to 20% or more for most people in the first full year of activation of these tools, depending on their profession. So with a 10% efficiency gain, a full-time employee could produce the same level of output in 156 hours, which saves 17 hours per month.
You didn't know you were going to do math when you started listening to the podcast this week, huh?
Well, thankfully, we're breaking it all out for people. So just follow along line by line. You don't even have to do the calculations. And the direct savings of those 17 hours is $612. So when you compare that to these tools being about $30 a month per user, that savings looks pretty good. And you kind of sum this up saying, short answer is that these AI tools, when properly integrated into companies with effective education and training, will be the greatest value in business software history. Can you unpack your thinking here a little more? Because I see a lot that businesses sometimes aren't always convinced of the value of these tools. They get hung up on 20, 30, $40 per user per month because naturally so, they're budget conscious. But the math that you do here on the value of these tools when properly applied seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I mean, the point I was kind of trying to make, and it was funny. I think I wrote this like Thursday morning when I was on my flight to Arizona. So I was up at like 5 a.m. And so I put a disclaimer on this, like, hey, it's really early and I didn't sleep much. So if my math is off, like, forgive me, but it's directionally correct. And I think it held up even once I got a cup of coffee in me. The math still kind of stuck correctly. So it was on my mind because when I was recording the piloting AI courses that I mentioned earlier, there is actually one of the courses where I get into this concept that, one way to look at this is the productivity you're going to gain. And so as we look at the cost of these tools, it doesn't take much to justify it. So, if it's $30 per user per month, and actually, ironically, I went into Google Duet AI today, which is for Workspace, which is their version, of Copilot and ChatGPT team. And it is now $36 per user per month.
Hmm.
They've raised the rate. So it works out perfect. If you have a person making $75,000 a year and you get them Duet AI for $36 a month, if you save 1 hour or if you increase their productivity 1 hour, it's basically paying for itself. So on the surface, it seems like a no-brainer. And then when I went to publish the post, I actually was like, oh, hold on a second. People are going to misinterpret this, that I'm saying everyone should go out and buy 150 licenses to Duet or Copilot or whatever. And that is actually not at all what I was saying. So then probably the most important part of the post, and I think the thing that resonated with people, because this post did take off quite a bit. I think it's almost 18,000 impressions and 270 some engagements or something like that. So what I said at the end was that you should not. These companies want you to buy 150 licenses. If
Yeah.
you've got a 50-person marketing team, they want you to buy 50 licenses. If you got a 10-person team, they want you to buy 10. Like, they want you to be buying as many licenses as possible and committing to a 1-year engagement. that is not what you should be doing. So what I said at the end was, do not go buy licenses for your entire company or team just because the math works out until you have done three things. So the first was, you have to have generative AI policies that guide usage. If you've listened to this show at all, you've heard us say this over and over again. So if I turn this on for our 7 employees and I don't tell them how they're allowed to use it, like, are you allowed to use it for internal and external purposes? Do you have to disclose if you've used it for internal, external purposes? Do you have to tell me that you used AI to write this email back to me? Um, how are you going to protect the data? What are you allowed to put into it? What aren't you allowed to put into it?
Mm.
So there's just these fundamental things you have to answer for generative AI policies. And even if they're not perfect, you need to give your team guidelines of how to use the technology before you turn this on for them. You also, then the second thing was, have an AI education program that teaches them how it works and provides onboarding. So if you just like, if Mike and I get this turned on, we generally kind of know how this stuff works. Like, we'll find our way. But if you turn this on for people in your marketing team or customer service or sales or your C suite, and you've provided no training for what it actually is, or even what generative AI is, like, people have heard that term, but reality is most people who have interacted with this technology have used a free version of ChatGPT a few times. Like, obviously, we live in a bubble where everyone's using this stuff all the time. And if you listen to this show, there's a decent chance you probably live in that bubble as well. But the average business professional and leader has no idea. I cannot tell you. Like, I the last like 10 talks I've done, every one of them I have asked, how many have used ChatGPT? Everybody raises their hands. How many of you used the paid version? Almost no one raises their hands. And so my argument is always, if you're not using the paid version, you have no idea what generative AI is capable of. Like, if you're not using the more advanced versions of these tools, then you have a misperception of where we are with this technology. So number one is have policies. Number two is teach your team what it is capable of. Show them, give them, hey, here's the 5 use cases you should be using, and here's samples of how to do it. Here's sample prompts, here's template. Like, really show them so they get the value. And then the third is have someone who owns the rollout, training, and oversight of the program. So if you turn on Copilot and go get your 10 licenses, or Duet AI or ChatGPT or Jasper or Writer, like whatever the platform is you get and use, if no one is making sure that's being utilized, then there's no value in it. And I think, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Oh yeah, Dan Slagan. So Dan, the CMO at tomorrow.io, commented on the LinkedIn post. And he said, for the right people, 100% worth it. I'm a fan of having a usage minimum with clear value that people need to adhere to in order to qualify for the company to pay for it. I thought that's a brilliant idea. A usage minimum is a great way to put it. So we're going to give you this tool. It's going to cost us $30 per month for you to have it. You have to use it X number of times, or you have to like show that you have increased productivity by X amount. Like, have a metric tied to the rollout of this. And if you can't do that, if you don't know how you're going to measure utilization or success or value, then don't buy the license for that person. So again, it just kind of goes back to this idea of what we suggest, and we talk about over and over and over again. The whole idea of the Piloting AI series, basically, start with a pilot program that has a small number of users who are trained to do it right. They are given guidance. There's oversight. There is measurements in place of how they're going to be assessed on it. And then look at that and prove the value before you go buy it for everybody. So you got 50 people in your company, put 3 people in the program, put 5 people, put a person from sales, a person from customer support, a person from marketing. Like, do it cross discipline if you want to, but do this in a controlled way. You're going to get pressure from the technology companies to buy everyone the licenses for 12 months. It is rarely going to be the right decision.
So, as part of this, you also mentioned it's really important for someone to own the rollout of AI technology in the organization. Like, what should that role look like? Who should be in it?
I think for bigger companies, it's going to be like an AI ops type of role. We've seen that emerging as, someone who understands the internal workings of the organization. Maybe they're project management, or I don't know, maybe it's HR. I don't know where they're going to come from, but someone who actually learns the product themselves, like deeply understands the product and the capabilities, and can do the internal rollout and training, work with the vendors, things like that. So in the near term, it might just be the people who are going to be using the tool. You might just have someone on your team. You're not going to give them a new title necessarily to do this. But I think as organizations start to really scale this out and it starts moving beyond one or two pilot projects and you're managing a number of different vendors and onboarding processes, that might be where you start to see more and more AI ops titles or something along those lines coming through. Or, it might be generative AI manager. I don't know. Like I'm not again, this is to me like the exciting thing. Like if you're kind of on the frontier here and you're like taking our piloting AI classes and you're the only one in your organization like is really figuring out where to go with this, I think you're going to see a lot of people kind of like develop their own title and career path saying, hey, I think our organization needs someone that does these 10 things. And that is not a role in our company yet today.
Mm.
And I'm seeing it being called an AI ops manager or director, whatever that is. And go get yourself like a new career path potentially, being the one that's kind of championing this within the organization. And I think the key is if you can tie that to value creation. Like I think this role can increase our productivity 15% in 2024. You're going to get a meeting in the C-suite with that kind of claim. So if you can build a business case to show the value and like, hey, we've been testing it. Here's what we've seen over the first 3 months. Um, we saw an increase in efficiency of 20% on the writing team. We saw an increase in productivity on the creative team of 30%. The developers are, if you can go with numbers, the C-suite's going to listen and they're going to see value in what you're doing as a professional.
So, in our next big topic today, Google Bard just got some significant updates. So, back in December of 2023, Bard was got an upgrade in the form of Gemini Pro, one of Google's most advanced new models. It was made available in Bard in English back at the end of 2023. Well, now Bard, powered by Gemini Pro, is available in 40 different languages and is now available in more than 230 countries. And as a reminder, we covered recently how a popular AI leaderboard actually ranked Bard with Gemini Pro as the second most capable AI model out there right now, behind only GPT-4 Turbo. They had actually beat out some versions of GPT-4 and a bunch of other popular models. Now, another really important piece of this is that Google also announced uh, that you can generate images right within Bard in most countries around the world at no cost now using its new Imagen 2 image generation model. Now, this model, Google says, has been trained on higher quality image description pairings and generates more detailed images that are better aligned with the semantics of people's language prompts. It is more accurate than our previous system at processing details, and it's more capable at capturing nuance, which means it can deliver photorealistic images across a range of different styles and use cases. What's also interesting about this is that as Imagen 2 is rolling out across Google's suite of products, they have significantly prioritized the model's safety. They've added quite a few guardrails, technical guardrails, to prevent you from generating offensive content. They also conducted extensive red teaming to make sure they mitigate potential harmful and problematic content. And also, all images generated with Imagen 2 in consumer products are going to be marked by Synth ID, which is something we covered on a previous podcast episode. It is a tool developed by Google DeepMind that adds a digital watermark directly into the pixels of the image. So you can't see this with the human eye, but basically you can quickly identify if an image has been generated using AI technology. So Paul, as you're reviewing these updates, how big a deal are these advancements and these new features in Bard?
Yeah, Imogen 2 is interesting because I don't know if people remember back, but when Midjourney and Dolly came out in was that like February, March 2022. So
Hmm.
before ChatGPT came out, we actually started seeing image generation tools. We weren't really hearing generative AI as like the category describing all these capabilities until ChatGPT is like really when that phrase started becoming very popular. But the reality is that in spring 2022, these image generation tools started emerging. Google did not publicly release image gen. So they had a tool like Midjourney, like Dolly, but they did not release it. Maybe because the product wasn't ready. They explained it more as like a safety thing that they didn't put it out. And then we saw these capabilities start becoming available through, is it Vertex AI? I think
Yeah.
is kind of like the thing you can build on with Google, that the average business person wouldn't be using Vertex, but a developer could build things on top of that. And so now we're seeing it directly built right into Bard. So I think that what we're starting to see is the more comprehensive approach that Google is taking to compete head to head with Microsoft and OpenAI and others here. And so the ability to have one, Bard is free. It now has this very powerful large language model, as you mentioned, Gemini Pro, which is currently the second most powerful, built right in. And now you have a powerful image generation tool. We know they're going to mess with video. They
Mm.
own YouTube. Like, video is coming to Bard at some point. It may not be in the form of Gemini Pro. The thing I start to really wonder here is where's the monetization strategy? Like, I know I can go pay $36 a month for Duet AI, but they're not replacing search and ads with $36 a month for corporate users. So like the thing I start to wonder is what is like what is Gemini Advanced slash Ultra? Like, is that a paid version of Bard that I might actually want to use instead of ChatGPT or Perplexity? Because I think what's gonna happen is in the coming months, we're gonna start to really see the full picture of what Google's vision is for Bard. There's some increasing murmurs that Gemini Ultra may be around the corner,
Mm.
we could be seeing the release of the more advanced version of this model, at some time, and then I assume that would probably be a paid version of Bard is what I'm guessing their strategy is. But I went back to, there was an article in June in Wired magazine with Demis Hassabis, who people remember he's the head of Google DeepMind, and he was talking about Gemini. It was like the first time that they really acknowledged that Gemini was something they were working on. And so I went back to that because I keep trying to figure out like what is the grand plan here? Like where does Google go with this technology? Because their search business is being threatened. Like they know that. Their ad model probably is being threatened in some capacity, as you and I have talked about. Perplexity is just a better user experience. Like if I'm looking for information, I don't like 10 blue links anymore. Like I don't want to click through stuff. Google knows that. Like, but they can't just replace their ad business overnight. It is where their money comes from. It's their profit engine. So they have to know that. And so what is the play here? And if you go back to that article in Wired magazine, Demis talks about like the infusion of their DeepMind capabilities with the large language model. Because one of the things Google has is DeepMind that no one else has. And at one point he said, there was a quote he said where like Demis Hassabis attributed like 80 to 90% of the advancements that have been made in AI. Oh, here it is. If you look at where we are in AI, I would argue that 80 or 90% of the innovations come from one of their Google teams internally, either the
Mm.
Google Brain team, which invented the transformer, which led to ChatGPT, or the Google DeepMind team. If you want to see what I'm talking about, I've mentioned this probably a bunch of times on the show, but go watch AlphaGo. So back in 2016, I think is when the AlphaGo movie came out. It's when their AlphaGo machine defeated world champion at the game of Go, Lee Sedol. And it's incredible. Like the strategic ability, the reasoning ability, and they're envisioning building that technology into this model. So they are very much moving in the direction of AI agents, the ability to reason tasks, the ability to have chain of thought, the ability to like solve problems, mathematics, coding, like, and so I think it's really important. So again, to surface this as a main topic, because you can't look at Bard today and be like, it's just not as good. You can't look at Google and think, yeah, Perplexity is just better. They're going to win.
Mm.
I've said it over and over and over again. You cannot bet against Google. They have more data than anyone probably, and they have more AI history and capabilities than most other companies, if not all of them. They didn't they weren't ready for generative AI. Like it was the innovator's dilemma. They had the technology, but to do it would have had to disrupt their own business model, which is very profitable. So they were stuck, and now they're trying to figure out their way around the innovator's dilemma, I guess, here, where their people have now come for their core business. But I think we just have to keep our eye on this. And for me, it's all about what is Gemini Ultra or advanced and how does it fit into this picture? And I do think that in the coming months, we're going to have much more clarity around their bigger vision for what happens next.
So it sounds like business leaders definitely need to be paying attention to the moves Google is making, especially as a marketer, if any of your initiatives or work touches any type of Google property, right? Like whether you're using their tools in your own work or you have an active presence on YouTube, et cetera, or in search, obviously. What do these updates mean for the average business leader trying to figure this stuff out?
I don't know that they mean too much yet. I'll say what I'm doing, and I don't know if you're doing something similar, Mike, but so we have ChatGPT slash plus, like I have, the paid version personally, and then for the company, it is still my main tool. So the two tools I use in lieu of kind of what I might have previously done only in Google, I use ChatGPT plus a lot.
Mhm.
And I also use Perplexity increasingly for search. So those are like two daily workflow tools for me. They've become. What I think I'm going to likely now do with Bard is I will my normal use cases for ChatGPT, I will also probably run them in Bard side by side and compare the outputs. Because Bard's free, I can do that. Like I don't have to spend another $20 a month to get, Gemini Pro and Bard. So this is kind of what I always suggest to people is Anthropic Claude is a really good tool. Bard appears to be a player. You have ChatGPT. Maybe you have, Jasper or a writer or something like that. It's going to be a constant game of leapfrog. And I think when you have your core uses that are part of your daily workflow, or even like interesting ones you want to experiment with, run the same prompts through each of the tools. And, maybe it's every, couple months or when a new update comes out in Bard, go back and say, okay, summarization, ideation, like whatever your normal uses are for these tools, go in and run them. And maybe like create it, say, here's my 3 or 5 prompts. And every time there's a major update to a system, I'm going to go run these same 3 or 5 prompts and see the improvement for myself. I think that kind of consistent use of the same prompts that enables you to go and see the improvement on your own is a really helpful way to think about it.
So, in our third big topic this week, we saw earnings calls for quarterly earnings come from Apple, Alphabet, Google's parent company, Microsoft, and Meta. And they all had a significant AI component. So, first up, Apple CEO Tim Cook confirmed that generative AI features are coming to Apple software, quote, later this year. While he refused to reveal more details at the moment, many people believe this is a likely signal that Apple is making a very big move into AI. Second, Alphabet slash Google talked a ton about AI agents. CEO Sundar Pichai said that Google Assistant would, quote, act more like an agent over time. And by agent, we mean an autonomous AI assistant that can do things for you. And the company actually also refers to Duet AI, which works in docs, sheets, et cetera, kind of as an AI assistant. They already call that an agent in some of their public facing comments. Not to mention the information previously reported that Google is working on an agent called Pixie for its Pixel phone. Microsoft also showed very solid earnings with revenue from the quarter growing moderately faster year over year. And interestingly, 6 percentage points of growth in its Azure cloud business also came from demand for AI services. CEO Satya Nadella gave a shout out to Microsoft's, quote, small language models, which it's rolling out. And these are less costly AI models for their customers. And users of the company's GitHub Copilot AI assistant for coding are also up to 1.3 million users from 1 million in October of 2023. Last but certainly not least, on Meta's earning call, Mark Zuckerberg talked about the company's vision to build full general intelligence. Specifically, he said, quote, previously, I thought that because many of the tools were social commerce or maybe media oriented, that it might be possible to deliver these products by solving only a subset of AI's challenges. But now it's clear that we're going to need our models to be able to reason, plan, code, remember, and many other cognitive capabilities in order to provide the best versions of the services that we envision. So, Paul, I want to start with Apple. Can you unpack the significance of Tim Cook's comments during Apple's earnings call? While he was short on details, the company does not talk about AI explicitly too often in these types of settings.
think we maybe mentioned this on the podcast last week. Yeah, they for whatever reason just avoid the term altogether. Like even in their own messaging, they'll talk about it like machine learning in some ways within like their chips and stuff like that, but they just don't talk about the technology as AI, even though the iPhone has been infused with it for like 10 years.
Mm,
Just a decision they make. So I always wondered like when the pressure was going to hit them to where they have to acknowledge for Wall Street purposes that yes, we actually are building AI and we are a leader in it. And this was the earnings call where it finally came to a head. Um, so yeah, him mentioning AI and specifically generative AI, I think is a very big deal for where Apple goes next. He did, I don't have the exact quote here, but he did say something in the call like, we like to build things, then talk about them because he was getting pressure. Like, what exactly are you going to do with generative AI? I think there is the obvious thing of Surrey has to actually become intelligent, like be
mm,
functional. I think I've said before, like it has to do something more than weather and reminders. Like 95% of how I use Surrey is to set reminders on my phone, like set a reminder for tonight at 6 p.m. to do this thing. Um, I would love to have it actually function for something way more than that. And I do think we are going to get that. The date to watch here, I don't think they've announced the actual day yet, but in June they have their worldwide developers conference and he alluded to later this year they would be, announcing things with generative AI. My expectation is June is the date to watch. There will be probably a lot of announcements and then I would assume what they would do is probably make those announcements available to developers to build on top of. And then I would expect maybe in their like September is usually when they do updated iPhones and things like that. So I would think that maybe by this summer we'll get a better vision of what they're going to do with AI. And then probably by the fall of this year, we might actually start to see what a next gen operating system looks like, how it's going to be infused into your phone, how Siri becomes smarter, and then I wonder at what point we start to see the vision for what does the iPhone evolve into?
mm.
Especially with the Vision Pro coming out. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes in the rapid fire. But I really start to wonder like what is the iPhone? How are AI agents going to be infused into this, as you alluded to earlier? What does Siri look like? And I think we're going to get a lot of answers from Apple this year. And it's the one company I just keep waiting for. I mean, Google, I'm extremely interested in what they do and how they evolve. But I think Apple is often just overlooked in this space because they don't tout AI all the time. And so they're kind of forgotten about, but they're a major player.
So, speaking of Google, they definitely made some noise about AI agents, kind of combined with what you were talking about related to Bard and Gemini. How do you kind of see their rumblings about AI agents kind of fitting into the overall strategy or vision of that business?
Yeah, so AI agents, if you're new to the show and you haven't really heard us talk about AI agents before, the basic premise here is all of these major AI labs are all trying to build models that can take actions on your behalf. So right now, the language models we have today that are, that we see and experience through ChatGPT and Bard and Claude, they can't take actions. They can just build lists of things. They can't go and book flights or send your emails for you per se. They can write your emails. Um, and so they're all moving toward a phase where these things can take actions on our behalf. And I think the significance of a Google and or an Apple is you already trust them with all of your data. So we talked, I think I mentioned last week, this Multion is like this
Mm,
AI agent company that I started tracking last week. And to use it, you have to give it access to your browser. Like you install it as a Chrome extension. And then it sees everything you do. And so the question becomes like, well, do I trust this company? Like, who is it? Like, who started this company? Who's funding it? What government is maybe behind it, or what sovereign wealth fund is like, I have no idea. And it might not be any of those things, but I don't know. Google and Apple, if they come to me and say, "Hey, we now have AI agents that can take actions on your behalf," and it's Google, it's like, well, you already have everything. You have, I use Chrome for everything. Like, you already know everything I'm doing. So I am far more likely to experiment with a tool or to adopt a tool that's coming from a major technology company that I already trust with my life. Like, they have all of it stored. And so I think for the startup ecosystem, it's not probably great that these companies are moving in that same direction, because I think a lot of these companies are just going to get rolled out. Like, they're just going to get obsoleted, or maybe they get lucky and get acquired for some talent acquisition. But it's hard to look at things being built in the startup community that Apple and Google and others aren't going to just come out with themselves and obsolete those things. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I pulled Reuters just because, for context, like, one of the ways that we used to look at this stuff. So before everyone was talking about AI, like before ChatGPT, when we were just building the AI Institute and trying to create awareness about this, one of the ways we used to gauge the companies that were serious about it was how many AI machine learning engineers they had on staff. So I would go into Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I would look at and keep track of how many AI engineers were working at these different companies. And the other one was mentions of AI on earnings calls. And prior to ChatGPT, it wasn't very common. So according to Reuters, and we'll put the link in the show notes, the term AI, or artificial intelligence, has been uttered on 38% of conference calls held by S&P 500 companies in January. So that was this year for Q4 earnings. A Reuters analyst transcript shows that's up from 34% at the same point during third quarter. But the one I thought was awesome is I looked at what was it last year in January. So January of 2023 was 15%. Now, there's a common mistake people make when calculating percentages. I see this all the time, even in like mainstream media articles. But to go from 15% to 38% is not 23%. So the assumption is 38 minus 15. That's not how it works. They're percentage points. So to increase from 15% to 38% is 153% increase. It's remove the percentage signs. To go from 15 to 38 is 153%. So the mentions of AI on earnings calls in a 12-month period is up 153%. And the leaders for the January calls, Alphabet and Microsoft, at 53 and 52 times each. So again, like, I think, when we're talking about this topic, part of it might be of interest to you as an investor, like where are the stocks to be thinking about, the companies to be tracking. But just to understand, one of the things I always say when I do my keynotes is, there is a necessity for a next gen professional and a next gen leader, because the technology companies that power business have bet everything on this. And so when you look at earnings calls and you see the significance of the mentions by their CEOs and CFOs, it is all of they're thinking about. And so what has to happen is, this technology that they're building, AI agents and intelligent virtual assistants and all these things, it will get diffused into society and into businesses. And so you, as a business leader or a practitioner, marketer, whatever you do in your career, the opportunity for you is to be the one to figure this out. It's not going anywhere. Like, it's only going to increase the amount of times they're talking about it and the amount of products they're rolling out and how quickly those products come. So, I hopefully it's interesting context for people. I personally, no investing advice here. I'm not telling people what stocks to buy. I personally have avoided Meta stock forever. Like, I just was not interested in Facebook as a company, because I knew that they had one of the leading AI research labs in the world, and they didn't seem to care. Like, it was just basically being built into their news feed and into other products like Messenger and wherever else they're using it. But it wasn't the focus of Zuckerberg. The metaverse wasn't. I didn't care about the metaverse. I thought it was 10 years off if they were lucky. Once they pivoted and started truly building their messaging around their AI capabilities, that was when I actually said, okay, now this is an interesting company. And so I have personally started taking a much greater interest in Meta as a stock, And the day after their earnings, it jumped 21%. Like Friday morning, I was at this talk and I'm looking, I was like, oh my God, they're up 21%. Now, part of it was because they put out their first dividend, I think, ever. But I think in large part, it's the AI thing. And so I'll read one quick thing and we can get into rapid fire. Um, on the call, Zuckerberg addressed the open source issue. And so we've talked on this podcast many times about closed models like Google and OpenAI, where they're not sharing what they're doing. You can't go build on it like you could an open source model. And then you have the companies like Mixtral and Meta and others that are creating these models and just sharing them so people can build whatever they want on them. And so Zuckerberg addressed this in the earnings call. And so I'll just read this because I think, and again, like we won't unpack this now. Maybe we'll come back around to this, but I think it's a really important thing for people to hear because I've wondered this myself sometimes. So he said, I know some people have questions about how we benefit from open sourcing the results of our research and large amounts of compute. So I thought it might be useful to lay out the strategic benefits here. The short version is that open sourcing improves our models, and because there's still significant work to turn our models into products, and because there will be other open source models available anyway, we find there are mostly advantages to being the open source leader, and it doesn't remove differentiation from our products much anyway. Um, then he gets into specific strategic benefits. First, open source software is typically safer and more secure. That is one opinion. Like there are people who do not agree with what he's saying here. That is typically safer and more secure, as well as more compute efficient to operate due to ongoing feedback, scrutiny, and development. Big deal, blah, blah, blah. Efficiency improvements and lowering compute costs also benefit everyone, including us. Second, open source software often becomes an industry standard, like a Linux is kind of what they're thinking about here. And when companies standardize on building with our stack, then becomes easier to integrate new innovations into our products. And then third, open source is hugely popular with developers and researchers. We know that people want to work on open systems that will be widely adopted, so it helps them with recruiting, talent and things like that. So, I think again, topic for another time, but there's always this debate of, well, isn't open source just going to give everyone, including bad actors, the power to do all these things? Yes,
Mm.
it will actually. And I tell you, like, after just spending time with a bunch of attorneys for a couple days, I got asked this question like a dozen times about like the dangers of open sourcing. So I don't know. Fascinating thread to pull on in a future topic, but that is why Meta's doing it. It was the first time I think he's given like a super clear answer of why they see the value.
So diving into some rapid fire topics today. First up, we just saw the launch of Apple's much hyped Vision Pro VR headset, which started shipping in the US last week. And
Spatial computing. We probably shouldn't
spatial
refer to it as
computing is the
VR. It's their category. They don't want to call it VR, AR. It's spatial
yeah, so
computing.
this is an important point that we'll get to because it combines a little VR, a little augmented reality, and they're going to wrap this term spatial computing around their headset. And the headset itself starts at $3,500, and it's actually the first new Apple device to hit the market since the Apple Watch, which is why everyone has been desperate to get their hands on it. And we've already started to see some early reviews. In the show notes, we'll link to literally thousands of words of reviews that pick apart kind of every detail of the device. So you can take a look at every individual element of this. But the overall idea here is exactly what Paul mentioned, that Apple wants to usher in this new experience with this device that they're calling spatial computing. And this essentially means seamlessly working and playing in both virtual reality and augmented reality. So basically putting apps and media and games in some cases overlaid onto the real world. Now, from some of the reviews that we took a look at, it seems like the Vision Pro is being praised for its ultra high quality display and its incredible pass through technology. So, this is what allows you to kind of see the world around you, along with those VR and AR elements overlaid on the real world. It's also being lauded for the fact that you don't need a controller to manipulate the environment around you or the apps or the windows that you have open using the headset. You simply use your hands. However, The Verge, which is largely complimentary of the device, notes that, quote, there's so much technology in this thing that feels like magic when it works and frustrates you completely when it doesn't. So basically where they got was this is truly a stunning consumer facing headset, but we're still in such early days with figuring out, okay, exactly how are we applying this device? How often are we using it? Where are we using it? And what does it mean for kind of our habits when it comes to actual computing and getting things done online? So, Paul, what was kind of your initial read on the Vision Pro? Anything excite you about this?
Yeah, I kinda like I'll break it into 4 quick thoughts. 1, the technology is remarkable. Like, I watched the video of how it's made, which was pretty incredible, like, the whole manufacturing process that goes into this. I know they've been working on it for years. I think there was a was it Vanity Fair? Maybe Tim Cook did an interview where I think he talked about, like, Steve Jobs was actually involved in some of the early conversations
Mm,
around this thing. So, they have had this vision to build this device for a very long time. So I am anxious to try it. I don't know that I'll buy one. Sometimes I'll read reviews and it's like, oh, I got to try this thing. But the thing that comes back to me is like, I feel like I would use it for like the first 3 days and just be like in awe of it, and then it would probably sit on my desk because it doesn't seem clear yet. Like, is this supposed to be a consumer device? Is it mostly going to be for enterprises and business users? And I don't know that like we know yet, but what Apple has is a massive developer community. And I could see some killer apps being built where it starts to become more clear the true value of this thing. The idea of being able to interact with photos and videos and just see them like in, widescreen display and watch shows like that sounds cool to me. But I also find this product quite depressing. Like, I don't know. Saw so many things on Twitter of people like out in the real world, just like walking around with these things on,
mm.
sitting on the subway with them on, sitting at the restaurant with them on, and there's something dystopian about that to me. Like I don't know. I think it's different when it's glasses, and I feel like you and I are interacting. But if a guy walked in the office, Mike, and you were just walking around with your Vision Pro on, I would think like that's just weird. Like I don't know if he's like, I'm talking to him, but, like, is he looking at 5 other screens right now while we're talking to each other? Like,
Right.
phones are always with us, and they're distracting, and, like, it's kinda rude when we look at our phones when we're with other people, but I know when you look down and look back up, we're now together, like, we're conversing and making eye contact. If you're keeping your Vision Pro on, like, what I heard one that I thought was super depressing. It was, like, the New York Times lady that covered it, and she was talking about how they're gonna enable you to, like, watch movies together. So you're
Mm.
sitting on a couch together, both in your Vision Pro, watching the same movie instead of, like, just being in the room together. So, I don't know, I find the concept of walking around with these big goggles on to be somewhat depressing. I think if they are used within, like, an environment like an office and I'm using it as productivity because it sounds like it's an amazing potential productivity tool, that's cool. If we start seeing zombies with, like, fancy, expensive goggles walking around society, I think we're gonna have taken a wrong turn from a technology perspective. Which leads me to my last point, which is this is very much V1. Some of the reviews I've read is like, there's parts of this which is just the future. Like we are living in the future. And then there's glitchy things that don't usually come with Apple products that just don't work. And so I've heard the explanation of some of this looks like they worked on it for 10 years, and some of it looks like they worked on it for 10 days to
Mm.
like get something out the door. So the question for me is like, what comes next? Like, is this technology just V1 and 3 to 5 years from now, they figure out how to integrate most of these capabilities into a pair of glasses like the Meta Ray-Ban glasses? Then I think we are talking about a shift in everything. Like if they can put it into a form factor that doesn't feel dystopian, um, and I think what they'll do is they're gonna look at all the usage, what are the tools, the apps, what are the capabilities people are using, and how do we constantly kind of evolve this? But I don't look forward to like 5 years from now where, you're on a trip and half the people you're going past are in goggles. I hope that that is not our future, and I don't think it will be.
Yeah, hopefully we don't go full Ready Player One over here.
Yeah, it would
I think
be
would
really
probably be
that
a bad move.
it's a great example, and I that book was amazing, but it was depressing as hell.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, well, in another interesting sci-fi becoming science fact, we're considering the following question and trying to kind of solve for it, which is Who owns your voice and likeness in the age of generative AI? And Paul, this is something you brought up and posted about as we were using Descript, which we use to edit our podcast, to train synthetic versions of our voices to make it easier for Kathy on our team to edit the podcast and also some of the webinars and other content we create. This is a feature you can access right in Descript, which is affordable video and audio editing technology. You asked me, I wonder who owns the voice synthesis. And then you wrote on LinkedIn, from a legal perspective, anything that an employee creates is the property of the employer, at least given my understanding of the law. So do employers therefore have a right in perpetuity to use someone's voice and likeness that they willingly created for the company? We didn't sign any waivers or legal documents related to the AI voice training, which made you think that corporations need to update their employment agreements to address whether or not AI voice and video models are the property of the company or the employee. So, based on the comments on your LinkedIn post, it sounds like there's a lot of unanswered questions around this topic. Like, what are some of the considerations that you've kind of been thinking about since you wrote about this?
Yeah, so real quick, like the practical use case here, as an example, if people aren't familiar with this concept, is we train a voice by reading these like 30 seconds of text, and now in Descript is our voice is stored. And so the way you edit in Descript, like if so, this podcast, the transcript and the video will go into Descript, and then our team can make edits in Descript. You can edit just by deleting and adding words. So like you can cut out a part of the video. So let's say I just like whatever, I had a sneezing fit or a coughing fit right now. They could just go into that segment where I was coughing and delete it, and it cuts the video. It edits the video for them. So the use case in the voice synthesis is, let's say I'm talking about our AI Writer Summit and I say June 6th instead of March 6th, and I just kind of
Mhm.
screw up and lose myself for a minute. The team can go in and just highlight where I said the wrong date and change the date, and it'll sound like I said it seamlessly. So it's using my voice to edit text, which then changes the video and the audio. So that's why you would do it. Like if you're wondering why would we create models of our voice, um, but yeah, so I did put it out on LinkedIn, and then ironically, again, I was just with 100 attorneys, like, and this came up. I was using this as an example, and so I think like right now, the general guidance I was hearing from people is it's probably covered like under existing agreements in terms of the broad blanket of how these things are written,
Mhm.
but a lot of attorneys I've talked to are like, yeah, we probably should revisit employment agreements because this is just one example in the generative AI world. Like if you do the Hey Gen thing and you create like, let's say you're a customer service rep or a sales rep or an executive and you create a deep fake of yourself on Hey Gen that you use to send personalized messages to new customers or something like that. Who owns that? Like the when the executive leaves, like, does the deep fake go with the executive? Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
So my big takeaway was corporate and employment law has a lot of work to do. It's good news for attorneys. Like, I think there's all kinds of gaps probably in how these things are currently structured. And then I think I mentioned to our team internally, or someone asked about in a comment, like, what about like speaking engagements? To make sure that we're building in, you and I do a lot of public speaking, that nothing can be used that we create for, some sort of synthetic purposes. I don't know. So, just an example of how wild this stuff is going to get and how few answers we have, because honestly, like most people just don't even know to ask the questions. Like we just sort of take what's coming and don't really think about it. So yeah, I don't know, it was an interesting one. It was just sort of a random thought we had after the podcast last week.
So, according to the New York Times, there's a new hot job in corporate America, and that job is Chief AI Officer. According to a report recently from the New York Times, many people have long feared that AI would kill jobs, but a boom in the technology has instead spurred law firms, hospitals, insurance companies, government agencies, and universities to create what has become the hottest new role in corporate America and beyond: the senior executive in charge of AI. Now, the senior AI executive role they mention includes titles like Chief AI Officer and VP of AI, and they are essentially tasked with coordinating AI efforts and rollouts across every function and division. The Times actually reports that companies in very diverse industries, including Accenture, Ashley Furniture, and Equifax, have hired for these roles in the past year. So there's still not a ton of them. Not every company has this type of role, but it does seem like they're taking on an increasing popularity uh, in the corporate world. So, Paul, I'm curious kind of what you think of the value is, if any, is in having a chief AI officer or an executive in charge specifically of AI at a company.
Yeah, I think it'll probably start becoming more common. It made me remember back to October when the Biden administration issued their, executive guidance on AI, and they require this position.
Hmm,
So Section 10, advancing federal government use of AI, requires the creation of a chief AI officer for each agency within the government, I think. Actually, I'm looking at it right now. So chief AI, consistent with the guidance described in subsection 10.1, shall be represented on the interagency council. Requirements to designate at each agency within 60 days of the issuance of the guidance a chief artificial intelligence officer who shall hold primary responsibility in their agency, coordination of officials. It gets into like responsibilities. So, I mean, it's going to be a thing in the government. So, yeah, I think it's going to happen for sure. I don't know if it's necessary. Like the way I've historically looked at AI is it's going to be the job of everybody. Like
yeah.
your CFO is going to need to basically be an AI officer for finance. Your heads of strategy are going to need to be AI people. Like, but my only concern with this is that we think that by having a chief AI officer, we can centralize all the learning and knowledge about AI into like that person's role and the people
Okay.
that report to that person. When our feeling is no, that we need to everybody, we have to level all the company up. I don't care what their role is. So that's the one thing I wonder down the road is like, is it an unnecessary thing? But I could see certainly in the near term why it is because like again, I think of AI as like an underlying operating system to all of business. Like there isn't going to be a function of business that isn't affected by AI. But I guess it makes sense that you might need a leader who's figuring out how to centralize or decentralize this technology and the guidance and the policies and the principles. But I don't know. The CEO should be the chief AI officer, in my opinion.
So, another story this week shows us that the future is coming at us pretty fast because Elon Musk has posted on X, quote, the first human received an implant from Neuralink yesterday and is recovering well. Initial results show promising neuron spike detection. As a reminder, Neuralink is Musk's company that is developing implantable brain computer interfaces. In another post on the same day, Musk said that the company's first product is called telepathy and it, quote, enables control of your phone or computer and through them almost any device just by thinking. Initial users, he says, are going to be those they're kind of looking at people who have lost the use of their limbs as like a therapeutic technology or use case for it. So, Paul, like, let's zoom in and talk about your thoughts on this announcement specifically, and then maybe just quickly zoom out. Like, what does this kind of mean for this whole story of AI? Like, do we just end up at some point merging with technology like the effective accelerationist people assume we will?
Yeah. So first, apologies if you weren't aware that Elon Musk owns a company that's implanting computers into brains. Like if that scares you a little bit, like, yes, welcome to the future. Um, so I think Neuralink's an interesting company. I've been tracking it since its origins. It is part like amazing and inspiring, part terrifying. Um, they so their visions. I think part of the reason I find this disturbing is there's a book called Pentagon's Brain. So if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you may have heard me mention Pentagon's Brain before, but uh, this isn't a new thing to be trying to find ways to, um, I don't even know how to say this, create superhumans through machine interfaces with your brain. So if this is an interesting topic to you, go read Pentagon's Brain. I apologize in advance for what you will know and how you'll look at the world once you're done reading Pentagon's Brain. But it's a factual story about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and their work to basically emulate the human brain to create super soldiers. So the thing that worries me about this is DARPA does a lot of things for the US government, for the Department of Defense, that is under the guises of medical intervention, like to help soldiers who have been harmed and things. But that isn't their mission. Their mission is the protection of the US citizens, like of the United States of America. And everything they build is to protect the United States, defenses and weapons. So any other benefit is actually just like kind of PR. So when you read the mission statement of Neuralink, it is create a generalized brain interface to restore autonomy to those with unmet medical needs today. So again, the guise of this is all about helping people, which it will. But the second part of that mission statement is and unlock human potential tomorrow. So if you ever listen to Elon Musk talk about humans, he sees deficiencies in humans, in that our thoughts move faster than our words when they come out of our mouth or when we type them. And he thinks, and this company thinks, that we're going to end up in a future where the only way to stay competitive with super intelligent AI is to become them. Like, and so that it's weird. And again, like I always say to people, I always warn people when I go give talks, like it's going to get weird for a little bit. Sometimes on this podcast, it's got to get a little weird. And you need to know that in addition to running X/Twitter and Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company and all these other things, Elon Musk has a company where he believes that part of the way you protect the future of humanity is to merge humans with machines, and Neuralink is his path to do that. So it may help with some conditions right now, but that isn't why the company is being built. So I feel like I've apologized like 4 times already today for if this is new to you. I'm sorry. Go get like another cup of coffee and just go back to your normal daily life and forget about some of this stuff. But there's a lot of people I talk to who are fascinated by this sort of stuff. So here you go. You get a little bit of this when you listen to the podcast too.
We'll always mix in a dose of sci-fi, hopefully. All right. Now, next rapid fire
Back to
topic.
marketing, sales, and
Yeah.
customer service.
Yeah. Back to our regularly scheduled programming that isn't going to help you lose sleep at night, hopefully.
I got asked when I was at the thing in Arizona last week, I must have had 5 different people ask me the question, how do you sleep at night? They were asking questions about this stuff. And so we
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about it. They're like, oh my God, like, can we change the subject?
Well, hopefully some salespeople are going to sleep a lot easier because Microsoft just released a product that makes AI for sales and using it make your job better a lot easier. They just released Copilot for Sales, which is their AI assistant for sales enabled use cases. And this AI assistant works right in Microsoft apps to do things like summarize emails and meetings in Outlook and Teams, add leads and update CRM records directly from Outlook, write emails in Outlook using your data from your CRM, surface buying intent, budget, authority, need, timing, right in Outlook, create pitch decks, and create data visualizations. You can also get sales tips, info, and answers to customer questions while you're on a Teams call. So for $50 per month per user, your team gets powerful sales AI right in the apps that you already use. At the same time, Microsoft has also, in the same announcement, released Copilot for Service, which unlocks similar AI-powered use cases in customer service. Says Microsoft Copilot for Service unlocks an organization's trusted knowledge to accelerate onboarding and case resolution, improve efficiency, and automate tasks for agents in their flow of work. Without costly development time, organizations can simply point to their data and in a few minutes unlock generative AI-powered conversations across their knowledge bases. So, Paul, this really aligns pretty well, I think, with the first main topic we were talking about, because it sounds like any one of these capabilities in sales or service could potentially save companies thousands of dollars per year. I know I'm less familiar with service, but I know in sales alone, with some of the companies we talk to and work with on AI use cases, some of these are consuming dozens, if not hundreds of hours of employee time each month. What did you think of this?
Yeah, I agree. I think you just go re-listen to the first segment. Look at your sales team, your service team, find the repetitive data-driven tasks that they're doing that these tools now enable. Go get a pilot group of people to test it with 3 to 5 specific use cases. Pick a few of the things that it's able to do. Run it over 30, 60, 90 days. Benchmark performance before and after. Make your business case. Like, don't go buy it for everybody in sales and not teach them. Follow the process we talked about, the 3 steps we talked about. Uh, the other thing that comes to mind is like if your organization has Salesforce or maybe HubSpot sales or like whatever your CRM is,
Yeah.
you're looking at this saying, "Oh, ooh, that'd be really nice." Like, does HubSpot going to build those capabilities too? Do they have those capabilities? So I think when advancements like this happen, it causes you to step back and take a look at your technology stack and say, you know, should we be making a change, or is the company we're with going to be building these same things? We know Salesforce is building them. I know HubSpot's making efforts to build things. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, if you're in sales, customer service, you have to look at this stuff. Like the savings could be massive, the productivity gains could be enormous. So you owe it to your company to do some homework, but do it in a strategic way, like we talked about. Educate people, get a pilot test going. Get someone to oversee that program, make sure adoption is being done the right way, and then make a business case for whether you're gonna go all in and scale it up.
All right. In our last topic today, we have a new AI tool that could change the way we all shop, at least if we use Amazon, because Amazon just released an AI shopping assistant called Rufus. Rufus is trained on Amazon's product catalog and customer reviews, and you can ask it anything as you shop on Amazon's site or in the app. So you can ask Rufus to do things like conduct product research, like what should I consider when buying headphones? Compare products and categories. You can ask questions about products, discover products based on context. So, like, you could ask, what do I need for cold weather golf? You can get recommendations, such as, what are the best dinosaur toys for a 5-year-old? So, essentially, you're using conversational AI chat, much like you would with ChatGPT, layered over Amazon's entire product catalog and customer reviews. So this is currently in beta, but Amazon says it's rolling out to more US customers in the coming weeks. So Paul, what did you make of Rufus when you were reading this announcement?
I think it's interesting to see if people use it. It's like, okay, is this instead of Google search? Is it instead of Perplexity? Like, again, this complication of all of these tools doing roughly the same things. But in this case, it's trained on a specific data set. Uh, do Amazon customers want it? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. I think it's a logical innovation. I think looking at your proprietary data sets and saying, how can we infuse generative AI into this to improve the customer experience? This is a smart play. Now I just wait and see what the adoption is. Total side note, I went to see if I could test it as we were sitting here, like if it was live yet. And so I searched Amazon Rufus. And apparently, I'm guessing this is where the name came from. This is just fun trivia. Um, there's a webpage on Amazon called Our Friend Rufus. And I was like, oh, this is cute. They made a backstory of their AI. And it's like, no, it was actually a dog. So it says,
Oh,
for years, Rufus was a fixture at Amazon.com, dating back to the early days in the company's history. He belonged to Amazon's former editor in chief and principal engineer, and he accompanied them to the office every day. He's been affectionately called Amazon's shortest volunteer worker. And then it has a little bio on Rufus, including his vital statistics that he was born in 1994, perfect pause kindergarten graduate. So I I think the name Rufus may have actually come from a dog that used to walk the halls of Amazon in its early days.
you
And
know, any
Rufus
weird.
passed away in 2009. Just
Oh.
rest in peace, Rufus.
Well, Rufus may be immortalized
He
in
has
this
been
AI.
immortalized. Yes,
Yeah.
he fetches things. Like, it makes sense. It's
There
good
you go.
branding if
Yeah.
that's where it came from.
Honestly, as much as I love science fiction and science fact, I am kind of glad to get an AI tool. It's like not blatantly just named
Yeah,
after like
it's not Jarvis.
sci-fi. Yeah, yeah. Like, because that's where all the names so far. Where you're like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
get it, but like,
So I don't know if this is where it came from, but we're gonna end this podcast today believing that Rufus is named after a wonderful dog that used to roam the hallways of Amazon, and we're gonna end on a positive note as for our dystopian conversations from the day.
I love it. Well, Paul, thanks as always for breaking down what is going on in the world of AI this week. I would also encourage people To check out further our newsletter, go to marketingaiinstitute.com/newsletter, because that is where we cover even more stories each and every week, including both what we've covered on this episode and all the stories that didn't make it due to time constraints.
There's like a
There are
dozen this week.
a dozen of them easily. And that's increasingly the case. So you can get in one easy to read email digest every single week a complete picture of what's going on in AI. So Paul, thanks again.
Thank you, Mike. We'll talk with you next week. Thanks for listening to the Marketing AI Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you're ready to continue your learning, head over to marketingaiinstitute.com. Be sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, check out our free monthly webinars, and explore dozens of online courses and professional certifications. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.